welcome to Ensuring Success 2023. We are so glad you're here with us today. We are closing in on the last half of 2 days and 14 hours of continuing professional education for our accounting audience. We are so glad you're participating in this. We hope you're doing all 14 hours, because you really should, because every session has been great. We are sponsored by a number of companies that are making this event possible. We wouldn't be able to do this without our sponsors, so I want to call attention to them. They include ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, Canopy, Instead by Corby, CPA.com, eFile4Biz, Relay, WriteWorks, SafeSend, Suralink, Wolters Kluwer, Xero, and Zoho. And we particularly would like to thank BotKeeper, who is the sponsor for this particular session. We also are offering CPE, as you have heard, and the way we provide you with the CPE code, which enables us to ensure that you're watching the whole session, is 3 times during the session we'll take a little break, and during that break we'll provide you with a code that appears on the bottom of the screen. It's a 3-digit code, and you'll hear this sound. So when you hear that sound, you want to be sure to write down the code. You'll need all 3 codes that you get during the session in order to claim your CPE credit. And then after the session, at the end of the day, next week, whenever you want to, you can come to our site, click the CPE option at the top of the screen, and you'll see a list of all of the sessions with blanks to fill in for all the codes you collected in all the sessions you attended. And then you can download your certificates right on the spot. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panel before we get started. And I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor. And for this session, I'm being joined by Jim Bourke, Enrico Palmerino, Donny Shimamoto, and Alexandra DeFelice, who's my co-moderator. So I'd like each of them to introduce themselves to you briefly.
Yeah, so I'm Jim Bourke. I'm Managing Director of Advisory Services at Witham.
And I'm Enrico Palmerino, the founder and CEO of BotKeeper.
Hey, Donny Shimamoto, Managing Director of Enterprise Technologies.
And I am Alexandra DeFelice, Marketing and Business Development Director for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California. I am co-moderating with Gail, and I'm taking your questions. We love your questions, so there's question box under your streaming video. Please send some for the panelists. We'd love to ask them those questions, and I am your designated bell ringer for the CPE. Not meaning to scare my panelists.
Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
Hey, it's not first thing in the morning. You guys should be awake by now.
All right, so this session is called Big Data, How Much is Too Much? First of all, let's talk about what we mean by big data and how big is that? And that sounds kind of scary.
How big is it? It's massive, right? So that's what it's all about today. It's all about everything we do in our profession. It's about that data. It's about those massive pools of data that our clients have, that we have. It's everything that feeds into all the applications that we do today.
Yeah, the financial transactions, the notes on client files, advisory, supporting documentation, you name it, but taking it out of a lot of analog formats and actually putting it into an organized database and structure, and ideally a clean format that you could use to empower analytics, insights, and a lot of other things.
And actually, I'm going to counterpoint, because I think part of the reason Gail put this on here is last year we were talking about big data, and I was like, none of this is actually big data. Like, this is all technically small data, and we're not even in the profession leveraging small data enough, yet we think we're going to come and do big data. Like, really?
But Donnie's right, though. It's at the core of everything we do, right? Think about it. All our clients today have massive amounts of data. Every application that we use in our profession, what do? We take data from our clients, they put it to paper, we take that paper, we take that information off that paper, we key it into systems. It's all data, right? So how can we better leverage the small data that's out there, the big data that's out there, to make our jobs easier and to be more intelligent at the end of the day?
Totally agree. So when we look at like data analytics and the fact that now the tools have evolved, so I don't have to have an IT person come. I don't need like an Enrico and his team to come in.
I'm going
to correct that. We need people like them to build the tools for us, or they've built the tools for us that enable us to actually just use it, rather than have to figure out how to use it.
Yeah, the data ingestion piece, right? You sort of corrected yourself a minute ago. When you were talking about data. it's not always in the format that we need, right? And
Right.
that's probably one of the most confusing things that we have in our profession is it comes in all different flavors, all different shapes and sizes, and how do you get it? And then once you get it, what do you do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what holds back most firms from actually leveraging it in any sort of format that's going to be valuable to their clients. It's right now it's sitting in file cabinets, or maybe they've digitized it and it's files on a computer or stored on a server somewhere. But any sort of like digital copy of a document does not provide you a format that you could actually do something with. You need to hit it with OCR. You need to then take all the data out, and then once you take it out, you need to think about how you're going to store it, analyze, like what are you going to use it for? So what's the structure that you want the data to be in? And that is highly dependent on what you think you might be using it for, and then what are the relationships of that data to other data sets so that you can really start to do some powerful things around analytics and insights.
And it's every single aspect of what we do in our profession, whether it's tax. We know that massive amount of data out there in tax, in audit, right? Audits, reviews, compilations, all of that starts with data. In the client accounting practice, CAS practice, it's all about data, right? It's about getting that data that's all over the place and bringing it to one central point.
Yep, and especially in a world where everyone's talking AI, if you want to truly leverage and benefit from AI, you need the data to be in a digital, organized format that you can then put into AI to get some sort of result from. So, yeah, more than ever.
Yeah.
So break that down a little more. What do we mean by data? What kind of information are we talking about?
So I'll give perspective. So BotKeeper processes, like we've processed over 1 billion transactions, right? So that is probably could be considered big data. And it includes, like the data that we look at and store includes everything from payroll data, bank account and credit card, financial institution data. It could include data around a business's POS system or e-commerce system, or workflow uploads. Like if there's documents, it might be insurance documents and policies that we can extract info off of. So the way I look at it is if a firm is trying to do something with data, it's anything that's financially relevant to the business, and any other, I'd say, like ancillary data that could be relevant for context and with regards to that financial data. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of
There's
sources.
so much. I mean, think about even today. Most of our clients have websites. They're grabbing data from clients. There's so much intelligence that sits in that data that if we were to mine it and look deeper in it, we'd uncover all those stories that are embedded in the data. That's what, to me, it's everything out there. Financial, non-financial information that we're just now beginning to be able to leverage and help our clients literally to become more intelligent about running their businesses by analyzing that data.
I think the non-financial too is the key that we're seeing the difference in, because when I think, for example, of a car dealership, like when we look at the revenue from a car dealership is often driven by cars sold, so the number of cars sold. But the number of cars sold is actually driven by the number of people that come into the lot. But the number of people that come into the lot, which is my opportunity to sell a car, is driven by the amount of marketing that I'm doing that's actually getting people to my dealership, whether it's a virtual tour or it's an in-person tour, right? One way or the other, I have to get them there. And that marketing is really driven by spend. So we've got dollars on both sides, but there's a whole bunch of non-financial in the middle. And I need to understand how this flow of non-financial really helps drive the financial in the end.
Yeah.
So think about this. I mean, to Donny's point, you got the non-financial data, you got, Enrico, the financial data, and think about what happens when you put those two together. Think about non-financial data. Think about weather data, right? What are weather conditions? Think about an auto dealership. Think about the financial data from an auto dealership on a daily basis. Think about the impact that data has when it's combined together. Does weather impact financial data? Absolutely yes. So you combine that kind of data from all these disparate data pools, and you come up with some really cool, intelligent data that at the end of the day really helps everyone run their business a little bit more intelligently.
But that's the daunting task.
It is, right? That's where we need guys like you, like we need
disparate data sets.
data scientists, right, to make sense of this.
And it's I think like one of the biggest things that's holding the industry back is you have data silos, and then you have a format problem.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of like analog or non-structured data, and then you have a lot of siloed data sets, and being able to tie the correlation between today's weather and today's financial sales, and to do that in a format that gives you any sort of indication on what's going on in your business is really difficult. That's why we, like in in finance and accounting in particular, the average firm, I think, is now running on, 10, 12 applications to do bookkeeping?
At least.
And those applications don't talk to each other. Maybe they talk to the GL if you're lucky. And that was one of the things that we did with BotKeeper, was like if you could have one unified platform that integrated or collated all that data together in a unified, in sync format, you can now get at least a step closer to using it and generating insights and analysis out of that data.
That's so powerful. You think about it as accountants, what do we historically fly at 30,000 feet above that data, right? We do our flux analysis, analytical reviews, look for major changes. Historically, we haven't taken a deep dive in that data. And that's what's so exciting about this. The tools are all out there now.
Yeah.
The data's all out there. So let's utilize those tools to deep dive on the data and make more intelligent decisions.
So we're going to take a really quick break just right now. We want to see a brief word from our sponsor, BotKeeper, and then when we come back, you'll get your first CPE code for this session.
Keeping track of communications is a problem in every firm, but BotKeeper has fixed it with Activity Hub. Activity Hub is a centralized space within the BotKeeper platform for all comments, feedback, and interactions. We've standardized communications, letting your firm experience seamless interactions with your clients, ensuring that your priorities, those of your clients, and those assigned to BotKeeper are always on the same page. It's communication nirvana. Let's take a look. No sorting through long lists of comments or poking around to find what you need. It's all here, and you can filter to get what you want. Filter by comments to, comments from, date, or choose the module you want to see comments from, including tasks and work, documents, or transaction manager. And soon, you can also filter messages for their read and resolve status. For each message that's been read, the eyeglasses icon will turn blue. For resolved messages, the check mark in the circle will turn blue. Or combine your filters for even more specific results. Here, we'll filter just for the messages from the Documents module. You can click into the hypertext in any message to be taken to the task, document, or transaction on which the comment was made. Once there, you can use the Comments feature as normal. Just click the back arrow to return to your Activity Hub. That's all there is to it. Activity Hub makes communications simple and easy to find.
Welcome back. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the first CPE code for this session. So be sure to write that down if you're planning on claiming CPE credit for this session. All right, so we're talking about these vast amounts of big data that are out there, or not so big, depending on how you define this. But as an accountant sitting at my desk in my practice, how do I access this information, and then what do I start doing with it?
So it lives in your client's GL. And it also
starts there.
It starts there. Well, actually,
The financial data.
technically starts
Doesn't
in
even
your
start
client's
there.
bank accounts,
Okay.
and financial institutions. In terms of like what you can do with it, I think for the most part the industry has been hamstrung by time. Right? Like we all know there's a shortage of accountants. So it starts with taking a look at the data you do have and running some analysis against it, as Jim was saying. And then if you could start to pair it with non-necessarily like data. So imagine a world where you do an analysis on a company, you identify something's going well with the business and something's not going well. The best thing you could have done would be not just tell the company this is going well and things are heading in the right direction. Like it would be great if you offered 2 or 3 other pieces of advice as to how to accelerate that or how to mitigate away something that was negative. That's as easy as effectively doing a Google search and finding those recommendations for that situation. If you could bring those 2 things together, that'd be pretty powerful. And with AI and systems these days, it's becoming easier and easier than ever to start to take one data set that you have here that's structured and an unstructured data set there and bring in some actions or recommendations outside of the data that you're looking at in your practice.
So you think about it, what he's talking about is that as accountants, we have access to all this data in our clients' ERP systems. Mm-hmm. For the most part, you got QBO out there, you got Xero out there. All our clients are utilizing those technologies with a massive amount of financial data. And over the last, I'd say 12 to 18 months, we've seen an explosion of best-of-breed companies out there in the marketplace that are helping us to better analyze the data and do it much quicker than we've ever done it before. So with all of those tools out there, and leveraging that financial data, it makes really advising our clients, being that trusted advisor to our clients, so much easier today than ever before.
Well, it's that mix. It's the mix of the non-financial with the financial.
Yeah.
Right. So we do have that, and like in the car dealership example, we've got the advertising spend and we've got the revenue here. But it's really understanding all that data in the middle, which, like in the car dealership, it might be counting the number of people, right? Figuring out how am I going to do that? Is there someone at the reception desk that's just like, okay, 1, 2, they started coming in, just tick something. It doesn't have to be super complicated, right? Just tick mark it as they come through and double check. I mean, you know how many people are actually meeting with salespeople, you know how many people are actually purchasing. So you've got this data that you just need to collect it differently. And it just doesn't have to be complicated.
And you know, it's not something that we've done for years as accounts. Like I said before, we look at data up here at 30,000 feet. And it was only recently that we started saying, what happens when we have these disparate data sets? And for me, the light that went off, I sat in a room with a data scientist, and I've always advised clients, well, you know, your advertising expense may need to shift, or your insurance expense is higher than normal. Data scientists start thinking about other things about the data. Like, my brain doesn't work like a data scientist. So you know, you combine like a data scientist and an accountant in a room, and now you're exploring new ways of combining that those disparate data sets. You come up with some amazing pathways for our clients on running their business better.
To your point, I mean, if you think about all the non-financial data in that car dealership example, each of those is a point of optimization opportunity. So are you trying to optimize your ad spend to people on the lot? Or are you getting great people on the lot and you need to optimize the conversion from those people who get on the lot to getting into the dealership so they can have a conversation with sales. That could be and then that could tell you that like the inventory on your lot might not be ideal, and now you need to be doing a turnover of your inventory, or it could be telling you that you don't have the right signage or people outside on the lot to strike up those conversations and get them. But you don't know any of that unless you start collecting those data points and tracking it, so you can figure out where the opportunity is.
Well, and I like that you're bridging into non-financial solutions, because that's why we changed what we do to business transformation, not just finance. Because when we're looking at that whole value chain, the entire value chain, we have to look at different things. Like you said, if the sales are not occurring, is it a problem with the salesperson? Are they not converting? Are they not properly talking about the value of the car or the things that are happening, right? That's a training issue, or that may be an information issue, or maybe it's an inventory issue. I don't have the right product out there. How do I actually adjust that? Do I understand my market?
And if you're just looking at financial data, it's not going to tell you any of that. It's just going to tell you sales are down.
Yeah.
Right. But think about the value that accountants and CPAs bring to the table by, in the past, focusing on financial data. Now we're becoming more advisors. The whole profession is migrating towards advisory. I mean, you're almost doing it entirely in what you do.
We are doing it entirely. We don't do any compliance work.
So think about that. And your clients are probably appreciating that value that you're bringing to the table today much more than it did in the past when you're doing the compliance work. That's where we lock clients in for life. And we help them make more money at the end of the day, run their businesses more profitably and again, to me, the secret is analyzing the data with the right tools to help our clients make those decisions.
Yeah. And I would build on what you said with saying that it's the difference, I think, today is making data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
Not this gut feel like, I think we need to do this. What does the data actually tell us? And can I actually even model that out? Can I do a what-if scenario? If I did this, what does that look like? If I did that, what does that look like? And that also helps us on the scenario planning side. What happens if we have another pandemic? I got to reduce inventories. I got to change up some of my things. We can do those types of analysis from a business continuity standpoint and also be ready in case of a disaster. So in the positive side and in the negative side, we can use data to actually help us make better, improve the business.
Yeah, and Gail, this is not big firm stuff. This is small firm stuff. The sole proprietor on Main Street has the same access to those tools as the biggest firms out there in the country. Yeah. So I don't care whether you're a sole proprietor, a regional firm, a national firm, Big Four firm. Today, the tools, there's a lot of best-of-breed tools out there that give us really those keys to the kingdom, allow us to help our clients make those right decisions.
And the smaller businesses are not as complex, so you don't need the more complex tools. It's not the same tools being used by your firm versus probably a lot of the people that are online. Right. There's much simpler tools. There's tools that help streamline stuff. So it's really about finding what are the right tools for what you're trying to accomplish for your size of client and complexity.
So let's go back to this car dealership. So you can make decisions based on gathering more than just the financial data
Absolutely.
for the dealership. How about taking that a step further? And I mean, this is the value of a niche practice. I think if you've got other car dealership clients, then you can start saying, well, this is what you're doing, but the 3 down the street are all doing way better, and this is their results. So how do you say you don't have the other clients? How do you get other competitor type information to help that car dealership?
So competitive information, there's so many databases out there today that are available, industry-specific databases, and you use car dealerships for one example. There's a massive amount of data out there, but again, it applies to every industry. So there's so many smaller firms today across the country that are experts in dental practices, in law firms, and there's so much information available out there. So you have the ability to do a lot of comparative analysis. But again, the better you get at it, the more clients you get in that industry, now you're able to compare the clients that you specifically have in that region, in that marketplace.
So you're creating your own data.
I've seen some small firms out there become super experts in those very niche areas, and they're much better at it than some of the bigger firms that are experts at everything.
You can leapfrog, I think. If you're, let's say, a small firm, you don't have a niche, or you're a large firm, you have a new client that you're trying to take it up to that next notch. There are firms who do specialize, there are businesses who do specialize, you can engage with. You're going to spend a little bit of money up front to get the insights, but you get those insights one time. Now you can replicate and repurpose those insights across every single individual car dealership you get going further. The other thing I would say is, like, not to be like a total cop-out on this, but AI is very powerful, and you can literally ask, if you were to write a good prompt, AI to tell you, what are the KPIs of a car dealership? What's the optimal conversion rate of someone who walks on the lot to, purchase? What inventory is selling in the market, most? Is it mid-size SUVs? Is it crossovers? Is it automobiles? I mean, these are all things you can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Bard, you can ask a bunch of other things. You'd want to ideally be asking on like a pro license or a license that has the most relevant data, so you're not basing your decisions on like 2017 numbers. But
That's cool. Think about combining that analysis you're talking about doing with generative AI with the financial data that you're now generating. Think about how do I combine that to create a market?
So that's what BotKeeper just launched with our insights, because we'll do the analysis.
Perfect segue.
We'll do the analysis of the financials, and then we query the general populace information, and then we relay that back in to say, this is the trend that you're seeing, and then here's 3 recommendations to accelerate it.
So think about that. You want to differentiate yourself in your practice, in your CAS practice. If you have the ability to deliver that type of knowledge to a client, you're going to win that job over everyone else that's not being able to deliver that knowledge.
Well, and it's not even the not being able to, it's just the time to.
The
time to analyze, the time to curate, the time to go to market versus being able to just be, the differentiator for you is just doing it.
Right. And the fact that all of these best-of-breed tools, like I said before, last 12 to 18 months, we've been inundated with a lot of these great tools that allow us to very quickly make those decisions.
I want to come back to Gail's original question, which is, if you don't have it, if I don't have the set of clients that I'm already working with, so there are the tools out there. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. They're not sponsors. We need to get them next year and do a session on it, maybe, and talk about the benchmarking and how there are tools that help you with benchmarking, and if you already don't have the client base. But the flip side, going back to what Jim's saying, I think the real advice is, if you have that set in your client base, that's where you should be starting. You shouldn't be starting on this client that's a one-off. You should be starting with a client where you've got multiple, and you can start to ask the questions and understand really what are they doing that's different. And even if there's the trend, like I had a client that actually was the car dealership client. This was in, was it 2007 or 8, right, when we had the recession, and people were stopping buying cars. And so we said, well, you should be forecasting down. And they said, no, we're going to beat the trend. How are you going to beat the trend? And that was a completely different market strategy for them. And they actually did beat the trend. So just taking what the analysis said, which the AI is going to look at, what does everything say, and it's going to just reiterate that. Sometimes you got to think outside the box. And that's the value that we provide as accountants is, how can I buck this trend? How can I do something different than what everyone else is doing?
So, this is impacting advisory services, but what about
Yes.
the core accounting services like audit? How can the big data or not so big data, depending on how we define it, how can that have an impact on the audit process?
Think about the audit today. Think about the review today. Think about the compilation today. Data is at the very core of all of those engagements. Every single step, what are we doing in an audit? We're verifying data. We're going through the balance sheet. We're pulling lots of transactions. We're pulling analysis. It's all focused in the data. If we can start with the data and be able to ingest that data into our audit tools, think about how much more efficient we are. Think about moving the needle on quality at the end of the day. That's where it needs to start. The more we focus on the data instead of all the distractions, the paperwork and everything else is going on around it, that's where it all is. And every single practitioner out there, whether they do audit, reviews, compilations, it starts with the data on the accounting side.
And the beauty is on the audit side, the data's already there. I mean,
It's
this
all
is like,
there.
It's already there. It's just the difference between looking at it from like a very narrow aperture or a bunch of people looking at very narrow data sets of that data to widening the aperture and starting to be able to leverage tools that can give you greater level of analysis and correlation on data sets. And that's where you're going to find the anomalies. So while in the small aperture things look great, it's when you start to actually analyze and compare that and like trends that you see where else you'll start to pick up on, okay, something's off. Like there's something fishy going on right here, or everything is great and it all checks out because there's all this other supporting evidence and detail for such.
And for the people that weren't keeping up previously, we weren't allowed to do the entire data set and
Right.
use that. It was not considered efficient. But the guidance, I think it's 2 years ago, came out, right, that said, here's how you actually do it. And I don't know my SASs or FASs anymore, but there actually is the guidance out there that says this is how you use it. And you use it to actually assess risk, which is really the base of the audit. Where is there risk and where do I need to dive in because there are a significant number of anomalies or issues occurring that look in the data.
Well, and you couldn't do it because the amount of time you'd have to spend trying to analyze the whole data set.
The standard just didn't allow it.
But even if it did allow it, the economics would not make sense.
No, we totally could. We've had tools like the two major audits. I can't think of their IDEA and ACL. This is like 20 years ago. We could do it.
Data
Standards
extraction
just didn't
tools,
allow us to do it.
Yeah, data extraction tools have been around for a long time. Our profession historically has focused on a sampling process. You sample a certain data set, and whatever error you find within that data set, you extrapolate that error over the entire population. That's the way we've been thought. But today, technology is allowing us to go in, look at all the data much more quicker. And at the end of the day, I think it involves a higher quality end product, whether it's an audit, whether it's review, or whether it's compilation.
Agreed.
All right, we're going to take another quick break to hear a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with the second CPE code for this session.
If you've ever needed to review the books at month's end to find exceptions, you know just how painful it can be. Exceptions take a long time to find manually, and they can be easily missed. That's why we've created Bot Review. Bot Review continuously scans the general ledger, looking for transactions that need to be reviewed for exceptions. There are 13 exception types Bot Review automatically surfaces, producing a report for each exception type found in the GL. Let's take a look. The progress bar at the top of the main Bot Review screen tells you how many and what percentage of exceptions have been completed, are in progress, or haven't been started. Under the Exception Report tab, we see there are 10 exception reports generated for the selected time period. Click on Select for the one you want to review. Here, we'll click into the Unreconciled Transactions report. Near the top of the screen, you still have easy access to all your other reports, while your current report is highlighted here in blue. Beneath this is the Exception Reports transactions that need attention. You can choose to edit some details in line, or click the blue Edit text to the right of the transaction line for even more options. Edit any information, then click Cancel or Save Changes. You can also click multiple transactions in the report to perform bulk actions, including Mark Resolved and Dismiss. The actions available to you will change based on which report you're viewing. When you've finished addressing every exception in every report, you'll be able to click the Mark Review Complete button in the upper right, leaving you with squeaky clean books. Bot Review takes the tension out of month-end review, saving you tons of time and improving your accuracy. It's just another great reason to hop on board with BotKeeper.
Welcome back. And at the bottom of the screen, you should see displayed the second CPE code for this session. You want to remember to write that down if you're planning on claiming CPE credit for this session. So, I completely forgot where I was.
We're just having too much fun. That's
It's
the
okay.
problem.
Yeah, I think we were gonna.
You were going to launch it.
Yeah, we haven't polled you guys yet. I know you're dying to be polled. We're going to ask this question of you guys, and then I'd love the panel to discuss what you're seeing. The question is, how are your clients addressing big data challenges? Are they not addressing them at all? Are they exploring solutions to understand it? Or have they actually approached your firm to assist? And if they approach the firm, I'm just kind of adding this in on the moment, but if they approach you to assist and you are not one of these wonderful experts on this panel and you don't know enough about it, what should you do?
Is that a question?
It is.
Well, think about it. You're watching this session right now, right? You're hearing about, hey, there's opportunities out here to take our advisory to the next level. I mean, I would immerse yourself in this space right now. I would look at those best-of-breed tools that are out there. You talk about BotKeeper. They're out there in the space. They're dealing with that data. They're going to the source. They're grabbing it. So it's a matter of educating yourself on it and then really experimenting. Experiment on some client data and see for yourself what that actually can do, and then share those results with clients. You're basically giving your clients additional intelligence about data that they've had forever that no one's really taken a deep dive on. And so that's, to me, how you really strengthen a client relationship, by bringing those kind of things to your client's attention.
And it's like anything. You're not just going to like wake up and overnight now know how to advise or consult your client on big data. So you know, to Jim's point, like there are exceptional tools out there, like whether it's Coursera, where you can get great learning and training, and sometimes it's totally free. There's a bunch of universities, whether it's Harvard, MIT, Babson, you name it, that are publishing their courses online around these topics, because everyone's realizing that the more, as a whole, a populace, we understand AI, we understand big data, we understand the facets and its power, the more we're going to be able to build, do, and impact the world as a result. And this stuff is going to have massive impact. So I'd say there's a lot more free content out there about it than there has been in the past.
There are. To your point, kids are coming out of school today more intelligent about the tools around data and the impact that it has. I mean, you've seen so many more schools today with AI curriculums, majors, and in fact, when my daughter was looking for a major, I was, Kate, you got to go AI. It's all about AI. I want you to be a data scientist. She goes, Dad, stop. I want to be a dietitian. I'm like, oh, it's okay. So, but it's all about AI, right? It's all about data and understanding that data. The tools are there and they're available today.
And I want to thank you guys, because we've been doing our best to try and introduce the term AI into every single session. So good job.
We sort of worked that in. You didn't tell us that, though.
No, I didn't. No.
It's just that there's been so much natural flow. You guys are talking about niche or niche practices. It's just we tend to notice themes that surface every single day. And I will have the results of this poll. 71% said their clients are not addressing big data.
Opportunity.
Changes.
That's an opportunity. Your clients aren't asking for it, so bring it up. They don't know to ask for it. They don't know that they should go to their accountant to ask about help with this data issue, because the accountant's always done the tax returns, always done the audit. You know what? Differentiate yourself as an accountant and bring that to your perfect opportunity.
So how do you bring it up? This is another theme that keeps surfacing. Is it when they come to you in the beginning of tax season and you have a list of other questions that you can ask them? And if so, what would those questions be?
So think about this. You got tax season coming up. You got audit season coming up. If you're a bigger firm, you got staff out in the field. Educate your staff as to what to look for pain points with clients. I mean, think about this. As accountants, we look high level, as I mentioned before. We're 30,000 foot. And we look for anomalies, look for fluctuations, unusual fluctuations. But think about the power if we're now able to deep dive on the data. Maybe the client's gross profit margin is in line, but maybe there's a dog of a product that's just losing money. You wouldn't see that as an accountant up at 30,000 feet, but when you analyze the data, now you're getting more intelligence. Yeah. So it's educating your staff if you're a larger firm. And not only that, there's no downside on deep diving on the data. It's amazing what you're going to be able to find. I look at it, maybe you're walking along a beach looking for metal, and all of a sudden you're just finding caps and worthless pieces of metal. But one day you find a coin that's worth like $1 million, right? That could be the scenario with this client. You uncover something, some story, some problem that's embedded in the data.
And please, whatever you do, don't go to your client and say, hey, have you thought about big data? Or like, let me talk to you about big data, because that's not the terminology.
Freak out, right?
Exactly.
They're not going to know what that means. It has no relevancy. To Jim's point, and I would even say, like, before you start educating your team, find one person who you want to be like the go-to person to do this initiative.
Internally.
Okay. And say, hey, we're going to start to go from compliance and financial reporting to analysis, insights, and advisory, and you're going to be our person. We're going to pick an industry, a set of clients that we have a good concentration in. You're going to go and start to normalize that data set, create some level of benchmarks across it. You're going to start to probe into those businesses and understand, do research on the business and the industry. Like, really understand what that all the profit and margin in a restaurant comes in the last 5%. Like, you got to know the in and outs of that industry, and then from there, that's going to allow you to communicate in a context or a language that makes sense to them. You're going to know where to look, like, because in a sea of data, where do you find the coin? So you're going to want to know where to probe, and then you're going to want to start to just like create, I'd say, like a template that gives an example of what you could get if you had this conversation. And if you start, like, now, how do you introduce it to your client? You introduce it as, hey, we have a new offering that we're launching that is analysis and insights and analytics, and here's what that could look like for your restaurant. It doesn't have the restaurant's, particular data. It's going to be, genericized, but they can be like, wow, that would be really powerful. And the only way we buy things is most of us need to see it. You start saying, I give you insights and value. What the hell does that mean? You need to see, like, what that kind of the insights and value could mean. What's the kind of data that you're going to surface to me? How could that be impactful to my practice? That's going to start getting you clients. And if you can just use the same template again and again, and then you start to teach. Then you expand it to not just restaurants, to car dealerships, to others. Then you expand it from this one expert to your team.
Enrico, as a follow-up, and on the niche trend, are there one or two industries that lend themselves most to big data that, instead of being like, because I have 8 million different industries, I don't know which one to look at?
Yep. The answer there is going to be whichever industry you have the highest concentration in. Because if you in the world of big data, if I have one really large company with a lot of data, that's great. But if I have 10 companies, now I'm getting into the comparison, the unlike data, the unrelated data that is highly valuable when you relate it. That restaurants in your location, specific city, like you, that are either quick service restaurants versus like high-end niche. Like, it's all of those where you can start to like really correlate it, and that's going to allow you to give the best, most detailed, relevant advice to your given client.
Go back to that before you were talking about find someone internally. Find that champion internally. I got kids all the time asking me, Jim, how do I become a partner? What do I have to do to become a partner? I'll tell you, you differentiate yourself in this space. You create a new revenue for the firm in that space. That's a great way for someone to differentiate themselves.
It's a great project.
Absolutely, a great project that leads to differentiation and which could lead to partner paths someday.
And learning. I mean, you want to fast track, like, how do I be a partner? How do I get to the point, Jim, where I know what you know?
Yeah, that's it.
Deep dive.
Yeah.
We're getting a follow-up question. I know that we're now naming some tools, which is great, because now they're asking, where can you recommend getting industry KPIs? Key performance indicators, for those who don't know what that stands for.
There's
Just name a couple.
Well, look, here's the deal. It depends on what industry you're focusing on. So, for example, if a firm is focusing on law firms, there's a tremendous amount of law firm data that's out there and it's available, KPIs that are available. Some industries, you got to purchase it. Other industries, it's available out there. Restaurant data, it's out there. Restaurant associations. Go to the associations. Where those organizations go. They generally run studies. Same thing as our accounting profession, right? Or our state societies, the AICPA run studies.
So essentially the AICPA for restaurants is what you're
exactly.
looking at. Right?
Go find that. If you're knowledgeable about that specific industry, you're going to know that go-to organization. Go to them, ask them for benchmark information, and think about how valuable that becomes as you develop your expertise.
And it's not difficult, and this is, once again, because it's going to be a pretty big cop-out. You just Google take
You
what
and Google,
industry
man. You and
specific.
ChatGPT.
I mean, Google might be an
No,
investor in
but okay,
Bourke,
so what should I
and I might be a
Google?
heavy user.
Enrico, what should I write in Google?
It would literally just be your industry, whatever it is that you want.
Trade association?
No,
No.
what are the key
What are the
KPIs?
ideal core,
Key
best in
performance.
practice KPIs for restaurants, for
Alright.
car dealerships, for
That
whatever?
does seem pretty simple.
And you're going to get a
It
whole
is.
bunch of results. You're going to look at them, and then you'll find a company that specializes in benchmarking data or specific
right.
data for that. You'll find a company that specializes in analyzing your restaurant or analyzing a restaurant to identify the key ones. There's going to be, but for us to say, like, here's the ideal tool, we would be genericizing something that we're telling the audience you want to be specific on, like
Yeah.
to get the most
Okay,
relevancy.
fair.
The two that I see most common for benchmarking, which is now I remember them. One is profit sense. The other one is peer review data.
What was
So
the second one?
peer review data.
Pure view data? Okay.
Yeah. So those are the two I most often see, especially with smaller businesses.
Okay.
And that's
those
PEER.
PEER.
right?
Yeah.
But I love your comment. Use generative AI. Use that. Look at data. And if you don't know the organization you go to, ask it the organization to go to.
This stuff is available.
It's
out
there.
there.
Yeah,
It's-
we couldn't say this a year and a half ago, but today we could say it.
Yeah.
Right.
So is this available for any business, or are there particular businesses where you're really going to find a lot of good comparative data, or is it across the board?
Like anything else, there are organizations for almost everything that's out there, whether you do funeral homes or things like that. It doesn't matter. There's so much data out there. Now, if you're so unique, it's a one-off type thing, well, then obviously you don't have access to all that data. But again, most of us are handling healthcare companies, professional service companies, consumer product companies, retail companies. There's a massive amount of data out there.
If one of your clients is mining like a special ore off of meteorites, like,
Come
and
on.
there's probably
There's no association
there's probably
for that?
not a ton of those out there, and therefore no one's decided to like curate that. But to Jim's point, if it's a generalized industry or business, it's going to be out there.
So besides comparing to competitors, what other uses are there for when you get the data from other people in the same marketplace?
So I'd say, let me back up. You talk about comparing it to others. I think there's no better comparison than a company than to itself. How has that company been doing over the years? And today, you can grab a massive amount of historical data. Like I said, we've always had it. Maybe we didn't know what to do with it. Maybe we didn't have the right tools to be able to analyze it.
Or just the time.
Or the time, yeah, the time. To Donny's point, we've had tools. We've had data extraction tools since I was a kid in my firm. But today, we have time and availability and access to. So think about being able to analyze. Think about showing a picture of your client, how they've developed, how they've changed over time by looking at that data.
So, Donny, you focus on advisory, so you already know how to pitch this. So when you're talking about helping a company benchmark itself or learn from competition or grow in certain areas, how do you cover that in your marketing material?
We don't.
Oh,
So
okay.
for us, we don't, because otherwise it's kind of like, because depending upon the client, the industry, it's different. So we do it through a conversation.
Okay.
Right? So for us, our starting point is, what are your biggest pain points in your business? Where are your not just financial, where are your biggest pain points? That's the starting point. And then when we start to see the trends, or as they start to go into something, it's asking more questions. That's really the trick, is asking the questions to kind of get there and understand. And at that point, I may not have all the answers. So I would say, great, like, this is interesting. Let me research some more. And then that's where maybe then I'll find the kid or whoever, I shouldn't call them kids, right? That can do the research, or maybe I'm going to do the research. I'm going to Google something and just say, hey, there's XYZ problem in this industry. What are the key things that I need to know? So that then I can start to dive in some more and have that conversation with the business owner. What we often tell our clients is, I don't have all the answers. You actually have all the answers. I know the questions to ask you to get the answers out of you.
And the irony is, and I don't know how much time you spend ahead of even that combo in terms of doing research on that industry and on that type of client, so you can come in with a sense of awareness. Because you'd be surprised, a lot of business owners, the client, they're so focused on running and operating their business that they never take a step back to even do that research themselves. So like Google, how do I solve this problem? So if you had just done that one thing prior to having that conversation with them, you could be bringing, and it's ironic how basic it is, you could be bringing a level of insight to them that they didn't have, and now knowing what questions to ask them that make you appear like an industry expert.
So think about bringing that level of insight to them right at day one. You're proposing on a client in a restaurant industry, in the law industry, in the auto dealership industry. Give them knowledge. Yes, you could all talk about how great you are, your bios, where you went to school, but think about giving them knowledge about their industry right in your proposal. The tools are there today to be able to do that. Whether it's Google, whether it's generative AI tools, whether it's ProfitSense, you have access to industry knowledge. Think about showing that knowledge in the form of data in an initial proposal. I'll guarantee it'll differentiate your firm from the other firms that are proposing on that same engagement.
Or even just being able to use industry terminology. Right? If you go you have an engagement you're about to do with a law firm and you don't know what an eyelid account is, you haven't done your research ahead of time to be able to be like, if you would lose that deal because you don't deserve to win that deal if you didn't do the basic level of research going into that conversation.
And how can we find that in those industry terms? Where can we find those industry terms?
Google.
How did I know you were going to say that?
There's a little app I love to use. Like when people ask me,
well, tell them that everyone wants to know about apps.
Well, it's let me Google that for you. So it's a really fun one.
Are you making
If someone,
this up? You're not making this
if
up.
someone asks you a basic question and you're like, oh my God, you could. Why are you asking me this when you could be Googling this yourself? There's an app where you type in the Google search and then I can send you. I'm like, oh, here's the article, and it shows you a video of someone typing in and Googling the result, and it gives you the link. So.
All right, we have one more quick break to take. We want to hear one more word from our sponsor, and then as soon as we get back, we will give you the third CPE code for this session, and we have more, so don't go away. Welcome back. You should now see the third CPE code on the bottom of your screen, so you want to make sure you write that down.
A little birdie told me it was Donny's birthday, so I think he should ring the bell.
Donny's
What?
birthday.
So be sure to record that if you're planning on collecting CPE credit for this session. And as a reminder, when we end up, we're going to be sending you a notice when all the sessions go live on our site, which should be about 2 weeks, and we'll provide resources for each session for where you can get additional information. So the title of this session was, what was it? It was how much is too much?
How much is too much?
Yeah, so
You're losing it today. We
I know,
understand. It's all good, though.
It's
been a long
11
day.
hours.
It's all
so-
good. It's
Too
all
much
good.
data, Gail.
Too much data. Too much data in your head. That big data.
So
Sorry.
is there a point when it becomes too much data? Tell me.
For people, yes.
Yes.
For
Okay.
machines and technology, no.
Oh, okay.
The reality is like too much data. It's the analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis concept. Where if you're trying to stare at a whole lot of data and make sense of it, like we just as humans, our capacity to do so is not there. Like we do well with focused analysis. Machines, on the other hand, and AI in particular, is phenomenal at looking at large seas of data and drawing insights and identifying correlations and picking up on patterns. So was there such a thing as too much data? Probably at one point in time, but today, no. Like more data is more power, access to more data equals more possibility. So you want to, even if you don't know what you're going to do with it today, start to put your data in a structured or organized format such that one day you can decide it's available and you might be able to do something with it down the road.
And that's why we start with where's the problem, because that gives us a much more narrow scope. And before I even put my data in the format, I figure out what that scope is, and then only that data I now figure out how can I structure. Or maybe even within that, if they give me like 3 or 4 problems, I figure out which ones do I actually have data to or can we get data about, and then those are the ones that I would focus on first.
Okay. Can the data ever be wrong?
Yes.
Absolutely.
especially if it was entered by a human.
Absolutely. So think about this. Think about, do we ever get QBO financial statements at the end of the year, we're ready to do tax returns, and something's wrong, something's posted incorrectly? I'd say that's probably 99.9% of the time. Unless you're using BotKeeper, obviously, but 99.9% of the time.
Even we have a like 2% change rate. Yeah,
2%?
on
Is it a-
transactions.
really?
Yeah.
So it absolutely could be wrong. And that's where we can't just assume all the data is always correct and then start extrapolating the data and start doing things with the data, because if the data is wrong, our messaging and our conclusions might be wrong as well that we pull out of this. So we need to go through steps to ensure that that data is actually correct.
And this is why when I hear people talk about compliance, don't do compliance, I completely disagree with that. Somebody has to do compliance, because we're an advisor-only firm, but the first thing a lot of times we have to do is make sure that the compliance piece is being done right, because if that data is not right and that data is not of high quality, any extrapolations we do are off.
Yeah.
So the first thing, and in fact probably 60 to 70% of our clients, we got to go and look, okay, is finance operating correctly? Is the CAS being done correctly? Okay, now we can use that as a base. And the other thing too is the data shows you the slant of whatever it's been structured, like the chart of accounts has been structured in a particular way. And whether that actually helps us answer the question or not may or may not be true. So sometimes we have to look at restructuring the data or a different way of analyzing it.
We were talking about it last night. We decided we weren't going to allow others to review the AI's recommendations because we didn't trust non-people that we hadn't trained and that we weren't paying to do that specific job. And then it took 7.5 years of review and training and ensuring that the data was accurate for the AI models to hit a tipping point where they couldn't regress, where you couldn't introduce bad data and have them come down. So accurate data and compliance is super important for firms to do, and you controlling that allows you to control the margin of accuracy or the margin of error that you're going to have on those clients.
The other thing, the concept I think we got to introduce with this is bias data, and positive bias and negative bias. So positive bias is the things that we want to have happen. Negative bias is the things we don't necessarily want. And the example I always use for this is diversity, equity, inclusion data.
Yep.
So if we were to look today at what is the majority, if I'm saying who am I going to hire, I would look at who's currently successful, who's at the top of our profession now. Well, if we look at the top of our profession now, it's older white male.
Yep.
And if I were to use that criteria to say, well, I should hire more younger white males to bring it in, I got all kind of issues, right? That's a negative bias to the data. So I have to think, are there other types of issues, biases in the data that when I do give it to a tool, I have to say, ignore gender, ignore ethnicity, so that then, so that then now I'm getting a result that I can actually use.
Yeah.
So is there any way to know that you can trust the data you get if you download it from some source you found on Google?
Analysis.
Okay.
Like hitting it with machine learning or AI, hitting it with other powerful tools out there, it's not going to necessarily ensure that it's accurate, but because it can look at larger seas of data, because it's better at finding those anomalies and pattern recognition, it will most likely be able to serve up to you the things that have the highest probability of being inaccurate. And then it's up to you to treat and address.
Check your work, as we continue to hear in
Correct.
a lot of the sessions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, check your work. I mean, think about our profession's built on being CPAs, being that trust. This is what we do. We verify the accuracy of data and information. So we have the ability to transform it into this data space today to ensure that that data is
as accurate as possible.
As accurate as possible.
Yeah.
Can't say correct, but as accurate as possible.
Well, and a lot of that's going also back to our professional standard. It's the exercise of judgment and proper supervision. Like one of the ways I always talk about AI is you need to supervise AI. Treat it like a first-year staff. It's going to do all this stuff for you, great, but double check, have someone look at it that actually understands the data or understands the client or understands the industry. Do these recommendations make sense? Is what it's saying make sense? And would I then pass that on, or do I need to edit it or whatever first?
Would you ever trust anyone blindly? No.
No.
So you can't
Nor you would trust
a
data.
tool or a software or data blindly.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you. So both this session and the one before it have presented you with a lot of ways to think about how you might expand your practice. And we are going to take a quick lunch break for an hour, but when we come back, the next session is going to be on how to grow, elevate, and scale your practice. So we're really trying to give you some ideas to think about as you plan for the year and the years ahead. Meanwhile, we want to thank BotKeeper for making this session possible and for all the great information for our speakers who've done such a great job. And we will see you in an hour.
Awesome.